Alright, today I'm going over a valve adjustment. So adjusting the valves that are here and the other side too. This is a stock engine and we're going to be adjusting it out of the car because it's a lot easier to see, a lot easier to work on. This is the other side over here. I'm just going to show this side over here so it's easier to see. Alright, the first thing we got to get to is top dead center, which is down here on this pulley. There's bottom dead center up here. We gotta get to top dead center and make sure that we're at the #1 cylinder. So the way to check the cylinder is to make sure your distributor, you're pointing at the #1, which is this little notch right here. So I'm just gonna rotate the engine around and watch the distributor as it moves. Alright, so now as we're getting close up here to that notch, I'll check down here. I want to make sure that top dead center is right in the center of where the block is. So you can see it lined up right here. See the notch for top dead center right there in the center of the block. I'm going to make those direct. Alright, so with that done, I'm going to come to the #1 and 2 side right here. I'm going to pull the bail off. So just get that cover off. And this is a new build, so this is pretty easy to get off. There also would normally be some oil in here and probably coming out, but this is the #1 right here, so we got to check and make sure. Another way to verify is that you can hear that clicking. Both these rockers are loose right here. This is top dead center, so these should both be closed and ready for combustion. Alright, so you're going to need a flathead screwdriver and 13mm wrench. It's easiest if you're going to be working with the open end down here, because you're going to have to tighten it while we're holding the screws. Alright, so now for a close-up look right here, you got this screw and the nut that's holding it on both of the rockers. This is your intake and this is your exhaust right here. Intake is always in the middle. You can follow that up because here's an intake right here. So what we're going to end up doing is we're going to slip a feeler gauge in this gap right here. We're going to feel it right there to make sure that we're at 6/100ths of an inch. So to do that, we got to loosen this nut right here, and then that'll free up this screw that we can adjust with the flathead. Alright, so you're going to get your feeler gauge, super thin piece of metal here, 6/100ths. Sometimes it's better if you have the ones that are angled a little bit. This one's just straight, but it works. So you got to slip this into here with this pulled back, and you got to check that clearance. So I already adjusted these, but what you want to feel for is a little bit of resistance. If you're adjusting these, they might be a little bit tight. That's what you definitely want to avoid. So right now I can feel a little bit of resistance, but let's say it's tight. If it's tight, one, it's going to be really hard to move in here, or you're not even going to be able to slip it through. It's just going to get stuck. You're going to loosen this nut right here. So break that free. Once you've got it free, spin it back a little bit, and then you are free to make adjustments with this screw. I like using a big screwdriver head because it leaves less room for movement within this slot right here, but it really just takes tiny little bit, so even a quarter turn might be too much and close the gap too much. So again, let's say it's tight. You're gonna tighten this a little bit. You're gonna slip that feeler gauge back in there and feel it. So right now that I've loosened it, it's a little bit loose. So I'm gonna tighten it just a little bit. Still no resistance. Now I can start feeling that resistance right here. Now there's kind of some room, some wiggle room, but when you tighten this nut, it's gonna kind of bring this screw with it. So you might wanna do like just barely when you can feel that resistance. So I'm gonna back off a little bit to right about there. Now that I've just been able to start feeling that resistance, I'm gonna slip my wrench, my 13mm on. I need to hold this screw in place while I tighten this nut down. That's kind of hard to do. Again, you can kind of let it take the screw with it a little bit. That's going to get it just a little bit less of a clearance. Once you've got it, slip that feeler gauge back in there. still a little bit loose. Try to tighten this nut a little bit and hope that it takes a screw with it. There we go. All right, now I can start feeling that resistance again, and that's where you want to be. So that's going to have to be repeated for every valve on the engine. Because we're in top dead center for number 1, we can only do these 2. So once these 2 are done, it's time to come back and rotate the engine. Now remember the firing order. We've got 1, 4, 3, and 2. So again, watching up here, but also paying attention to top dead center and bottom dead center. If you have a stock pulley, I'd recommend taking a string across the pulley and marking bottom dead center down here, because you're going to need that too. So each half rotation, so when bottom dead center is now up here, then we go from 1 to 4. A half rotation again will bring us back to number 3. Half rotation again will bring us back to number 2. So to get to the number 2, which is right here, after we just did the number 1, I'm going to do 3 half rotations, so 1.5 rotations. And here we are at the second rotation with bottom dead center. So now again to check. Both of those are loose, and we're good to go to adjust the number 2. So from this point, once you've adjusted the 1, 3 rotations, adjusted number 2, you can close that bail up. You can move over to the other side. To get going on the other side, you're just going to do 1 full rotation from here. So bottom dead center will go around and show back up right here, and that'll put you at number 4. Once you've adjusted number 4, then you can move to number 3, and to get there, just 1 more half rotation. So again, the easiest way to check, you've got your reference point up here. When the distributor is pointing at this notch right here, it means you're at number 1. Then you can just make sure that the rockers are loose on whatever cylinder you're about to work on. Unless you've got something major messed up, then they both should stay loose, even though the gaps may have changed. Good luck with doing it. It's a little bit tough to do under the car. Remember not to jack your car up when you do it. And if you've got any questions on it, ask me questions in the comments.